welcome to episode 94 of Rubbish Talk with me, Alasdair Meldrum.
And me, Jane Bond.
And this week we're taking a bit of a deep dive into textiles, not a subject I know very much about, Jane. So be looking for you to help me out here, I think.
Well, I think we've kind of gone through it, and Mia's helped us out as well. So we're sorted. We're sorted. No worries.
So before we do that, as usual, a bit of news. So I think, apologies for me, I think last week I said we were going into our third year of recording. And I think I probably should have said we're actually going into their fourth year of recording, which, how time flies. And we're rapidly coming up to our 100th episode. So we're needing some ideas and inspiration for the 100th episode. So
yeah,
please get in touch.
We could do 100 years of waste management or something like that. I don't know whether anybody'd listen.
I'm not that old, Jane. I'll need to do some research for that one.
Yeah, well, we have people that can help us who are not 100, but slightly other than that. Anyway, are we going into our news first?
Big news that came as a bit of a shock to me that you're going to lead with.
Well, I know. So the court has rejected Biffa's £51.4 million claim over the deposit scheme. So this is all part of the deposit return scheme that was supposed to come in a few years ago, which obviously didn't, and we're now on the 2027 timescale. But Biffa had got the contract to set up all the scheme and everything like that, and so they'd bought all their nice trucks, they'd sorted out how they were going to do it and all of this sort of stuff. And then, obviously, it all collapsed and they'd spent, well, they're claiming 51.4 million. And basically what they said, which I think was a bit mean, the Lord Sanderson, who was the person who was hearing the claim and the judgment, rejected the company's claims that Scottish Government ministers negligently misled the company. And then, blah, 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 accused them of wishful thinking, akin to something approaching the alchemy capable of transmuting base metal into gold. I think that's a bit cheeky, do you? I mean, they did, to be fair, they got the contract, they spent all this money, so you would have thought they would have got something back. But, yeah.
I think there'll be another story to this. I would imagine there'll be an appeal winging its way in the very near future, because I think Biffa was fairly confident they were going to win this case. I do actually remember being at a meeting a long time ago, just when DRS was kicking off, and I remember the person from Biffa was sitting there saying, "That's us good to go, we're ready to go." And somebody said, "Have you got the contract signed and sealed," sort of thing. I said, "No, we're going ahead." So they were, I would suggest, fairly gung-ho in an initial approach, basically on the basis somebody said go, so they'd gone. So maybe it's that. Maybe they were a bit too keen to go in the first place. But it'll be interesting. I'm sure there'll be another instalment in this, Jane. I don't think this is the end. And I think that only came out last Friday or the weekend, so there's not been much industry talk about it yet. So watch this space. We'll keep you updated.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
And then the next bit I've got, the next bit of news is it's not hugely exciting news, but it's this obviously simpler recycling's coming into force down in England at the moment, and there's every second day there's another report about recycling and the changes. And there was an article that I picked up, claims of £400 fine under new household waste bin recycling rules labelled completely false. So it's basically, people trying to make scaremongering stories about it. And it's all to do with things like, what we've talked about in the podcast before. If you've got recycling collection for glass, you're not allowed to put things like glass, mirrors, Pyrex dishes, stuff like that, because it's a totally different type of glass. That's been the case for a long time. And to me, it's back down to this, people need to take a bit of responsibility for what they are thrown out and where it goes. And the newspapers need to do a bit less scaremongering about the whole change.
Yeah, and a bit more helpful about why the change is in place and what are the benefits from it.
Yeah.
Do you know, I had a bit of a moment at the weekend, because I had, one of these bottles of gin. I think it St Andrew's gin, right? And they come in ceramic bottles. Yeah, they come in ceramic bottles. So I'd got this bottle, I'm like, Okay, so it's not going to be going in my glass, even though it's a bottle. It's ceramic. Yeah,
Residual
so
waste, I think.
I put it in my residual waste, and I thought that's such a shame because it's a nice bottle. But anyway,
Reuse it as a vase, Jane.
I couldn't get very many. If I did that, I'd have so many vases and no flowers.
You'd have so many vases.
Anyway, moving on from my gin drinking habits. So the next one I've got, and again, it's a good news story. Eventually, they're starting to roll out the food waste collections in England. I don't know whether it's moving up from the bottom, the south to the north, but this one's talking about Bedford Borough Council. So leftovers, out-of-date food, blah, 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 will be collected from Monday the 30th of March in their bins and their caddies. Very nice looking little caddies as well that they've given them. What's interesting? When the handle is down, the lid is held securely to stop rats, foxes, and other pests getting into them. It also keeps smells and flies out. And you're like, well, yeah, let's do a bit of a positive side about why we're doing this. Do you think? Very good that they're doing it.
It's a bit like Groundhog Day, Jane. We did all this in Scotland 15 years ago, and it was all. I remember then it was all about you're going to get flies, you're going to get rats, you're going to get. Never seen a fly or a rat. I'm a damn. Very occasionally you get fruit flies in the summer, but that's a bit. But I think one thing that struck me with seeing these stories is the actual waste sector, whether it's councils, private companies. We seem really scared of selling the good news story. The good news story with that is they're introducing food waste recycling. That's going to generate electricity and fertiliser for the land. It's going to save them a lot of money in terms of their residual waste disposal bill. That's a good news story. But we don't seem to, as a sector, we don't seem to be telling that story very well. I remember way back when I first started in the sector, councils would run big campaigns about, for example, home composting, getting people to compost stuff at home to cut down on the amount of waste they produce. All sorts of things were done. And now we seem to be a bit scared to actually sort of highlight that people can actually take responsibility for their own waste. So that was almost a rant. So.
Yeah. But, at least they're introducing the food waste collections. Better than late than never. So the other one I've got is about bin men. And it's Manchester Evening News exclusive, right? A former binman has shared the unexpected differences he spotted when collecting waste in rich communities and poorer communities, and it's something he'll never forget. So basically, he goes to the poorer communities, and they were nice people, and they gave them lollies and stuff in their cold drinks, nice lollies in the summer, and they were really generous. And then he'd go to the other areas, and they wouldn't be interested. So, it was always the people who looked like they had nothing that tipped us more. I couldn't believe it, especially at Christmas. We'd get loads. Well, there you go. Did you know you could tip a bin man? Apparently so. I always tip my bin man.
I knew that. Yeah. No, they do quite well at Christmas. They do quite well at Christmas. And I remember just recently I was talking to a council. It was after Christmas, and I said, "How do you get on with getting staff out over the Christmas period?" He says, "We never have a problem getting staff out Christmas period because they always go out because they get their bonuses." It does. I remember some stories, and I'm sure John Crawford will email us after he listens to this and tell us some stories. But it did used to cause problems that if you left, in some cases people would leave a 4-pack of beer out or a 6-pack of beer out for the bin men, and then the bin men would have this problem that they had alcohol in the vehicle, and obviously they're not allowed to drink in the vehicle and so on. So that did often cause the bin men a bit of a difficulty in terms of whether they could actually take the beer or not. So if you are going to tip your bin man, it's better not to do it with alcohol because that can get them in trouble. So there you go. There's some guidance. And while we're talking about bin men, the number of posts I see about people presenting bins to me, and somebody from a waste collection side of council correct me. To me, what you do is if you're leaving your bin out, you leave the handles at the curb, and that way,
so it's easy for them to get.
collection crew to get the bin, and then when they empty it, they will reverse it so they know it's been emptied. But the number of people that I see are posting about things, and they've always left the bin the other way around for some reason. If you're leaving your bin out, the handle's got the curb, unless somebody corrects me. Anyway, last one I've got is a company called Waterhaul, who, and we've talked about this before, a company that was using fishing nets to make plastic components, and this one popped up in my news feed's really exciting at the weekend. Sometimes all I get is waste management stuff, but this popped up, and they make things like sunglasses, but they've also extended the range into litter picking tools and hoops for keeping bags open, that type of stuff that a lot of councils purchase on a regular basis. But these are made from recycled litter nets. So if you're in the game of purchasing litter pickers and so on, it might be worth adding them to your tender list, because it ticks the sustainability box in terms of using a waste, recovering that waste, and making a valuable product. So they've got a full website, and they do some quite nice sunglasses.
Okay, fair enough. You can use your sunglasses
What more do you want to know?
Your waste. Absolutely, fine. We can go with that. Yeah, very good.
So that's all our exciting news for this week. As I said at the start, we're going to talk about textiles. We're going to do a bit of a waste journey into textiles. And just before we go into Zero Waste Scotland did a recent report on a product stewardship considerations for textiles in Scotland, and that really tried to look at the whole supply chain of textiles, the production textiles, and then how the consumers look at it. So there's actually 3 reports. There's a policy discussion, a research report, and a research methodology report. So lots of reading in there if anybody is interested. We're not going to go through the actual report, but we're just going to try and highlight some of the issues and things that are going on in the textile sector, where the waste occurring, why it's occurring, and what we can maybe do about it. So that's the plan.
Like Alice said, it's 80 pages long, 3 reports, and the policy discussion is 80 pages long. I haven't looked at how long the other ones is, but so I suppose we're looking at what is the problem, really. I mean, everybody buys textiles. We've got to have textiles, because otherwise we're walking around with no clothes on and be freezing to death. So we have to have our outfits. We import approximately 240,000 tonnes of textiles every year, and around a third of that is discarded. So, 1 in 3 of what comes in is thrown away. Only about 53% of the textiles are reused or recycled. So, and again, half of that ends up in landfill or in incineration. We buy more clothes than ever. Where do they go? And there's so much there when you're looking at fast fashion, that Primark, £2, £2.50 for a t-shirt, buy a few t-shirts, so you fall to pieces, you throw them away and you buy a few more. It's how you kind of manage that and how we can stop that from happening. And I
would reckon, Jane, you've mentioned there a third is discarded every year. There's probably at least a third sits in a cupboard and never gets used every year as well.
Well, yeah, that's true. You never know when you might need it.
Absolutely. So one of the ones I looked into for this was there's been a real shift, obviously, for people buying. You used to go to shop and try things on and buy in the store. So there's been a real shift to online clothing. And one of the problems the retailers have got is between 20 and 30% of the textiles they sell, and in some cases up to 50%, actually get returned to them. So people buy things, they'll buy maybe a large and a medium, try it on, and then they'll return the one that doesn't fit. So they reckon that the amount of stuff outstanding with people is valued at 27 billion a year.
Wow.
Which is just incredible that they're going to get that back. And you don't actually even know. So if you buy a large and a medium and you only keep one, when you send them back, you actually don't even know if that's actually gone back into the resale chain or whether it's been discarded. So
yeah, I mean,
and that's just been a big shift in how we purchase things. But I'm not quite sure how the convenience of buying online is here to stay. But it's how do you improve that? How do you reduce that? That return rate. And I know some of the stores have stopped doing the free return for that to try and maybe minimise it a little bit. But anyway.
Yeah,
So what
I must
happens in
admit,
terms of the textile journey?
Well, I was just going to say, I must admit, I always go to a shop and buy mine because I like to try it on and make sure it fits because, it's all part of the process, it's all part of the journey. Right, so what happens?
Absolutely.
What happens? So in terms of actual production and manufacture of textiles, it actually uses a lot of energy. There's a lot of waste generated during manufacture and unsold material, and 5% of textiles are lost before sale due to production losses or, quality. When they go through their quality control procedure, they're not quite right, the labels are wrong, the stitching's not quite right. So before we even start, there's quite a significant amount of waste and energy and water used. So there's all to do with, so once you've made it, then you've got your consumer use. So what do people do with it? Hopefully they wear it. And then again, depending on how much they spent on the clothes, really, I think depends on how long they keep it. So if you spent a lot of money on a pair of jeans or a nice frock or something, you're going to look after it. Whereas if you spent £2.50 on it, you're not that bothered, are you? So it's that waste coming through there and the discarded items and what do you do with it. So okay, so you have worn all your clothes and you've decided either A, they don't fit, B, the last year's colours, or they might have basically if they don't fit anymore or the last year's colours or whatever, you tend to take them to a charity shop. You don't take your pants and your socks to the charity shop. Well, you don't tend to. So, you've got your charity shops, there's recycling banks and there's recycling bins, and sometimes there are these bags that people come around and you can chuck your textiles in bags and leave them out. So you've got quite a wide range of textiles there. So what is recycled? What is recovered? And what do we mean by textile recycling? A lot of it is just chucked away in the bin. I know we've done waste audits as well, and I always go back to the waste audit we did at one site where we just opened back a few bags of textiles, clothes, still with labels on. People hadn't even taken them to a charity shop or even taken them back to the shop to get them more money. They'd just thrown away. And then you take them to Oxfam or a cancer research shop or whatever you're going to take them. And you think, oh, well, hopefully, the next time I go into that shop, I might see my clothes on sale there and feel like I've done a good deed. But again, not all of that stays local. A lot of it's exported abroad. We think that third world countries might want our old clothes so that they don't have to buy anything, but that causes problems as well. How do we do this? What are the issues? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think one of the issues here is I don't think there's much clarity on what actually happens to, you put that big bag into the charity shop collection. Genuinely, how many of these are actually being resold? I would think probably fairly low percentage. And then if they're not resold, it used to be, I used to say that, they're put into charity shop, the good stuff gets resold, the poorer stuff gets made into rags and textiles for the garage industry and people that need drags and so on. And then the rest gets exported. But once it's exported, how much has actually been reused over there? So I think it's back to this thing that we talk about recycling really loosely as segregating it. We're not actually really talking about really recycling the material, taking the fibres apart and recreating new items, which is really what recycling is. So just on that theme, in terms of, I thought I'd have a quick look at material types. Dominant material type is still cotton, and that makes up about 50%, 57% of the textiles, but followed by polyester, and now yourself, more and more fabrics, jeans and things have got this stretchiness to them, and that's not from the cotton, that's from the artificial fibre that's in there. So they're quite often composite fibres, and that makes it actually really difficult to recycle. So if all our clothes were cotton, for example, it'd be relatively easy to recycle and recover that cotton. But because they're mixed fibres, it makes it much, much harder. So challenges with things like cotton is uses a lot of water and pesticides and so on in production. Synthetic fibres generally derive from fossil fuels and generate lots of microplastics when they're washed and worn. So, the actual different material types in the textiles is one of the challenges. And we've got the wee, what do you call it, the Plastel machine for telling the different types of plastic, and we've got one that does textiles, but it really struggles with the textiles because there's so many variations of different textiles. And I think that's one of the big challenges for the textile sector is that different material types.
It's like, we've kind of gone through it with plastics to some extent. There's so many different types of plastics, and it's difficult to recycle certain types of plastic because they're mixed plastics. The same things, totally the same thing with textiles, isn't it? There's so many different types of, nylon, polyester, cotton, mixed cotton and polyester, whatever. Yeah. So I suppose it's
maybe. Sorry, no, I was going to say, Jane, maybe what they need to do with the plastic bottles, that the plastic bottle industry has got to use a certain amount of recycled content in the production of plastic bottles. Maybe we need to insist that the retailers use a certain amount of recycled fabric in their products.
Yeah, and
I suppose that generates a bit of a market.
I suppose it just means, what do we mean by recycled textiles? And we'll come back to that in a bit. So I think that also the problem is shipping textiles to the second-hand markets abroad. A lot of them go to Pakistan, India, Malaysia, a lot of these, Asia, Africa, a lot of these places. Just looking at a bit of research, there's always this example from Ghana, isn't there, Alasdair? Yeah, there's vast amounts of discarded clothing, so we think, oh yeah, it's a really good idea to send it to, for instance, Ghana. And what happens is, they might use them in the markets or whatever, but not everybody wants our scabby t-shirts, and so then they get dumped.
I was going to say, was it Ghana that banned imports of textiles for a while?
Yes, one of the countries
because
did
they had
ban it.
too many or something.
Yeah. They don't have the infrastructure to manage the waste. So again, it's the same thing. We've been banging on about plastics. If you can't use it, it just gets dumped somewhere. And there's information some discarded clothing from UK brands has been illegally dumped in protected wetlands in Ghana. So, we know that some of our UK brands have ended up there because there's nowhere for them to go.
Yeah. And I think they did quite a bit of work about the impact on the actual, the market locally as well. That it actually, in theory, it was good getting all these fabrics in, all these clothes in, but it really decimated their own textile sector in their own country. So there is real challenges there. So in terms of what actually happens in the UK at the moment, so we reckon that about 49% of textiles are thrown in the bin. I reckon that's about 35 textile items a year straight into the residual waste. I do have a plan for a declutter in my own wardrobe, and I think I'll be well over 35 items if I do a bit of a clear out. So in terms of a lot of the reason why Zero Waste Scotland and so on are interested in textiles is they've got a really big carbon what's the word I'm looking for, June? They've got a really big carbon impact in terms of disposal or incineration of textiles. So there's a big issue there. It's reckoned that only 25% of textile waste is reused or recycled annually. I'm not totally sure it's as much as that. I think it is. I think the figures in terms of what's actually reused and whether, I think we're maybe baling that amount of material, we're putting it into ton bales, but I don't think we're actually recycling that, as in turning that textile back into a product in the same way as I was talking earlier on with my fishing nets going back into a litter picker. I don't think we're anywhere near 25%. I think we're kidding ourselves on if we think it's 25%.
I think it's the thing, if you reuse it, that's where your charity shops come in. That's where your online platforms, your eBay, your Vinted, your Depop, all of these different platforms where you can resell and reuse your things. It's when you talk about recycled, what do we mean by recycled? Because when we talk about recycling of our plastics, we talk about, crushing it down, we talk about flaking it up and then being used to make more plastics. Same with glass. You crush the glass, you put it back into glass. So how do you put a pair of jeans, how do you recycle a pair of jeans back into another pair of jeans? That's the interesting one, I think.
So this is back to my campaign, Jane. We should not, baling material up should not be classified as recycling. We need another category in there. We need another step. That baling up is fine, but then actually what we're going to do with it. So I think that there's work to be done, which I think, in fairness, the Zero Waste Scotland report was very much, there's lots of work needing done in this space as well. So
yeah,
what have we got next?
I think we've kind of gone through the charity shops and second-hand markets. It's the recycling. So it was looking at what do we mean by recycling. So we've got mechanical versus chemical recycling. So textiles to textiles. So you can actually break down the fibres. So if you're in plastics, you can actually break down the fibres, break it down back into polyester or the nylons or whatever. Woolly jumpers, you could always pull the wool out and then make yourself another jumper.
There was a woman doing that. There was a woman I saw on one of my feeds. That's literally what she was doing. She was deconstructing woolen jumpers and getting the wool and reselling the wool. Where it was or how she did it. And I've got a feeling that was just one poor woman trying to do all the textiles in the whole UK.
Do it.
She'll be busy.
So I kind of got some textiles are either processed mechanically or chemically. In mechanical recycling, textiles are shredded into fibres and spun into yarn or used as stuffing and insulation material. Chemical recycling, which is often used as synthetic fibres, breaks down the fabrics into raw materials. So, there is options for that. I don't know whether anybody does that, though, in the UK.
Well, that's what we need. We need one of our listeners to point us in the direction of an organisation or a person that is taking apart fabrics and recreating them back into fabrics on a scale. I don't mean a massive scale, but at least they're dealing with decent tonnage. We'd love to hear if there is such a person out there. We'd love to hear from me, and I'm sure we could get them on as a guest of a future episode.
Because he used to say, there used to be this big thing, wasn't it? It was my fleece was made from 20 plastic drinks bottles. And you're like, well, okay, that's quite clever. But then can you take the fleece and turn it back into another fleece? Or into another 20 plastic bottles? I don't know.
They liked saying that, and then they realised there was a bit of a microplastic issue with that.
Well, yeah. Yeah.
And then they decided maybe that was never a very good sales point, so...
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so there's mixed fibres, and I think that's the issue, and also low quality fibres. So again, if you've got low quality fibres, they get shorter and weaker than virgin materials, so that reduces the durability as well. So, there are issues with it, but again, it's trying to make sure if we can't reuse or recover or actual actually, Alasdair, based on our waste journeys, we shouldn't be buying it in the first place. So, try and
absolutely.
make things
try
last.
My best.
Make things last.
I try my best, as some people have noticed in the past.
Yeah. As long as you wash them in between, it's fine. So let's start with making things last and not buying them in the first place, and then we come down to our reuse and our charity shops, and then we get down to our recycling, and then obviously there's landfill and incineration. Worst comes to the worst. I mean, there was there not once, quite some of these designer brands, Alasdair, that actually used to have that security thing where they didn't sell stuff or something was faulty and whatever, and they had actually security on site to make sure that the textiles were buried or incinerated so that they were not recovered and reused because of the brand names.
Yeah,
I think it was Burberry. Now I think they're incinerating them instead.
Yeah, we used to work at landfill site. You regularly got producers who would require the destruction, like total burial, or if you're on an incinerator, the incineration of material. for that, to avoid other people getting it. The figure I find amazing, Jane, and we talked about this when we did our sustainability one last week, and we were talking about our number of flights we have in a year, but textiles contributes between 8 and 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions.
Really? Wow.
That's a massive, massive figure. And it's a lot of that's probably down to the fast fashion type thing, isn't it? So going back to the Zero Waste Scotland report, lots of work there and looking at policy and product stewardship, looking at how companies can work together, designers, retailers, consumers, all share a responsibility. How they actually make the companies, the designers, retailers take any responsibility. And I would suggest a much harder thing. And I think quite often, like all waste, well, lots of waste things, it ends up consumers get the brunt of it. Consumers get the blame for creating lots of textile waste. But at the end of the day, is how that's been sold to them and delivered to them. That's this thing. But certainly in terms of Scotland, textiles are now a priority product in terms of the draft circular economy route map. So that's good. That's all positive. And that report that was done was really sort of the data to back that up and where things are going. So what can be done? What are possible solutions, Jane? Where do we go?
Where do we go from here? This extended producer responsibility. We're rolling it out to quite a lot of products at the moment. And again, it's looking at, can we make this work for textiles? So make the producer responsible at the beginning and at the end for the textiles. So, again, you've got some sort of collection scheme or some recovery scheme. It is actively being discussed. I mean, at the moment, we've got one in for the plastics and that side of stuff, recyclables. So if we're looking at Europe, for instance, because there's always examples in Europe, isn't there? The Zero Waste Scotland report did identify the Netherlands as an early adopter, although it says it's mandated producer reporting since 2023. So again, reporting of how much textiles are put on the market and how much they've recycled or recovered. So they've got an estimated separate collection of 47% of discarded textiles, so separately collecting it, that's fine. 80% of collected materials suitable for reuse post-sorting. And then if you look at which, again, you think, yeah, that's fine. Only 26% of those are actually sold on the national market and 74% are exported internationally. So if you think back to what we were talking about Ghana, 74% of that is sent away. Yeah, so, and then the remaining non-reusable textiles, which they say 66% is recycled, so only 6%. However, only 1% was textile to textile. So only 1% of that went back into textile production. And you think, well, actually, it's great introducing all these things, but is there a benefit there? Where's the benefit apart from, well, I'm presuming there's I don't know, if you export it abroad, how do you cost that?
74% export abroad. It's been dumped abroad, isn't it?
Yeah.
If we've been really cynical.
Yes, it's very nice. We've got this producer responsibility, blah, blah, blah. But if all we're doing is chucking it abroad for them to,
it's driving that. Yeah. You need to drive that reuse. You need to try and drive that reuse by saying they must use recycled content. That would maybe drive a bit of a market. I know when we were looking into this, Jane, that some of the things I wasn't aware that existed out there is some of the retailers do have a take back and deposit schemes. So places like H&M, Zara and Primark, which I'll be honest, I was going to say very rarely in, but I could probably say never in. But they do have things that, I know young Mia was not aware of some of them. You can take, old textiles into these places and you will get vouchers and stuff, or you'll get charity donations and so on. So there is things that people can do with the charity shop donation as well. What they are then doing with it, hopefully they are actually segregating them, reusing what they can and so on. But it's not, I don't think people are as aware that they maybe should be of these opportunities that are out there with some of the big retailers. Because I think the retailers know they've got a problem here, and they're trying to do things to at least start the journey.
There is some examples in the Zero Waste Scotland report, and one of them I hadn't realised. and I'm not quite sure whether I'd do it. But Marks and Spencers are in partnership with Oxfam, so they kind of, resale through physical locations or online, and they claim that M&S claim that this has contributed an estimated £23 million to Oxfam's work. Customers can therefore clear out with a clear conscience. And it also says, which is fine, I'll take my clothes to Oxfam. But it says customers are also offered a £5 voucher if they donate an item of M&S clothing. Now, I kind of think that's a bit weird, because if I take my Marks and Spencers, I don't know, jeans or whatever, into the charity shop, and they're giving me a £5 voucher, do I spend that in the charity shop? Does that actually make them any money, or does it just mean that they get rid of more stock in their shop? Or do I get the voucher from Marks and Spencers? I don't know. I wasn't quite clear what it meant by that. So
I thought I thought from that you were donating them to Marks and Spencers, not to Oxfam. It was them. Marks and Spencers was taking them all to Oxfam, no?
I don't know.
So I'm assuming it's Marks and Spencers that are giving you a £5 voucher. There we go. We need some listeners to test this. We need some listeners to test this out for us and see if it works.
Because there is another one. Is it Zara we were looking at that gives you a £5 gift voucher as well if you...
Yeah.
Yeah.
A few of them. I could get lost with my wee clear out I've got planned. I could go out and test them all out. I could take a bag to each one and see how each one works.
Well, I don't know about Zara.
I'm not sure I'm not sure I'm that dedicated, but we could try. So what else have we got?
Well, we've got this. So the ACT UK programme is an advanced sorting and infrastructure investment, and they've got a website and everything, which is a programme which is aimed at establishing the UK's first advanced textile sorting and pre-processing facility, and that's called ATSP for short, just to use another acronym. So it's designed to turn non-rewearable textiles into high-quality feedstock for fibre-to-fibre recycling, which is just what we've been talking about, which is kind of what you need. So there's a website for it. They've done a report, and they're hoping to start their delivery. Technology is secured for delivery and operation in 2026. So I guess it's I'll watch this space and see what happens, whether or not we can turn our non-renewable textiles into high-quality feedstock. What do you think?
So this is the UKFT. They're the UK Fashion and Textile Association. So we did, for our vast amount of research we've done for this episode, we did try and download the final report, but the link is actually broken. So we need to message them and say, your link's broken, so we can actually read the report. But it looks like, in fairness, it does look, the type of report they're looking into does look like the right sort of approach to it, looking at how they do sort the textiles, how they do pre-process them and all the rest. It does seem to be moving in the right direction. So if we do find the right link, we will share it on the show notes. We'll do that.
Yeah, the link just doesn't go anywhere, unfortunately.
And then the other option is looking at eco-design regulations. So policies that mandate design for durability and recyclability. Rules that say you can't put something on the market if you can't readily recover that fibre and recycle it, which I think, if you think about the diversity of textiles that are out there, that might be quite problematic to some of the manufacturers. But some of the EU countries are already looking at that type of thing. So that's another opportunity.
So what have we got what have we got that's actually in place at the moment? I mean, we've got sorting, advanced recycling technologies. We had the guy on who they did the robotic sort, which again could be used to sort out different types of plastics, different. I mean, it was using it for waste, but there's no reason why it can't assess different types of textiles and different types of textiles. So we had that. Then we talked when we had Anthony Burns, episode 57. If you want to have a look at ACS Clothing, and again they did clothing rental, so we can have a look at that. Also, Vivo barefoot shoes, return and refurbish shoes. So there's all sorts of things. I
was going to say, Jane, poor Nick Noble, who is the chief marketing officer at Danu Robotics. always gets called that guy from the robots by you. So he has made comment to me before. So I thought better.
Sorry, Nick.
So
Sorry, Nick.
Nick Noble, episode 40. There will be. I think there will be technology. The robots can do a certain amount, but and there's lots of talk about AI doing things, but we know just from using that little Alasdair machine how complex that actually is in terms of splitting out. You mentioned there the Vivo Bear shoes. I've used that a couple of times. So in fact, I need to chase up where my voucher is. So if you return your Vivo shoes back to them, they will refurb them and they'll resell them on a refurbed part of the site, so it's cheaper to buy. But you will also get a voucher of, I think it's £25 off your next pair of shoes, which is well worth doing.
Nice. Very nice.
And you just fill in a wee form and take it to a shop, and they'll return it and so on. So yeah, so there are organisations doing good things.
I was doing a bit of a search through, and because I know there's clothes rental shops or clothes rental online, which some of them have done okay, some of them haven't, because it's how do you get people to change habits and rent clothes instead of buying them. So one of the ones I was looking at was John Lewis. And, obviously, I'm not the designer type person, but I was looking at these designer frocks here, obviously none of them are ones that I'm going to be tripping around into the Albion office, but this one was buy for £590 or rent from £76. I'm like, £76 to rent a frock? It's very pretty, but, I'd have to make sure the designer label was on it somewhere so somebody would actually appreciate that I was wearing a very expensive fancy frock. So, and again, lovely, but expensive. And then I thought, right, I know there's a company that does jeans, and I know there's a couple of companies, but the one I found very, very quickly was this HURR, rent designer jeans, right? And I'm looking at these jeans, and to be honest, they don't look very nice. But these ones here offer to buy £825 and you rent from £141. I'm like, I think I'd go to
bargain, Jane.
Marks and Spencer's and buy 40 quid for my jeans. It's like, my goodness.
You've just ruined Rubbish Talk's new sponsorship deal with the jean manufacturer.
But
they're not going to come and
give us any money. No, but I think the thing is, it's a very niche market. Obviously, what I was trying to point out was designers. So obviously, if that's the sort of market that you're into, it's a very niche market. But I do think renting clothes is quite challenging as a business, because you've got to rent them at a certain amount that people want to rent rather than just buy a frock themselves. So I think it must be a very difficult market to get into. That was my comeback on that one.
No, it's a big mindset change for people to rent clothes rather than buy clothes. But I think there's a whole, back to my usual rants. People buy far too much stuff they don't actually need. I think there is that, and I know myself. This clear out I need to have is. I buy things that, I genuinely never get a chance to use. And I've talked previous times about running T-shirts. Every race I do, I get a T-shirt, and I'm like, I only wear so many T-shirts. So I think all of the conclusion we've come to, Jane, is this is pretty complicated.
I think it is complicated because everybody wears clothes. People want to wear clothes that look reasonable. And, to what they can afford. So, and it's just what you do with them afterwards or whether you actually really need them in the first place. But,
I think in summary, it goes back to what we've talked about when we've done the waste hierarchy. Do you need it in the first place? Can you reuse it or get somebody else to reuse it? If you do need to recycle it. But I think what we're saying is don't add, there is recycling in inverted commas. Is there actual, and that, when I say recycling, we're baling it up and we're maybe sending it overseas. Are we actually recycling, all this material? Probably not. and it has got a big carbon impact and
Mhm.
disposal. So don't assume just because you're putting your textiles in a recycling bag, you're doing the right thing. Doing the
It's
right
better
thing
than
is
nothing.
not actually producing that. Well, it's better than
Yeah.
nothing, but don't actually produce the stuff in the first place is challenge. But how do you do that? And and I think that, the emphasis goes on to the consumer, and I think the retailers and the producers need to step up and take a bit of responsibility. And just something I spotted, and it's sort of related. The food manufacturers are having a big conference about sustainability of food, and for some reason it popped up on my feed, and I had a wee look at the thing. I went through the whole list of people they had on the system, and they had nobody in the waste industry actually talking to people about the waste industry, about so there's a huge issue about sustainability in food in terms of the amount of food that's thrown out and wasted. And they hadn't actually thought to have anybody. And I think the fashion side or the textile side is very similar. They're trying to deal with the problem and not communicate with the waste industry as to how they could maybe help. So
Yeah.
there we go. That's a bit of a deep dive, Jane. I think I learnt more about textiles than I've
Well, I must admit, I love a charity
known
shop.
before.
Love a charity shop.
So if anybody's got would love to sort of continue the conversation. If anybody's got good ideas for people that are genuinely recycling textiles, or there's any really good ideas or organisations out there, would love to hear from you.
Definitely.
And finally, what have we got left?
Just got your rant, Alasdair. Although you have ranted all the way through as well. So
I've not ranted that much. I've been quite calm today.
Oh, right. Okay, sorry.
It's enough. I suppose my minor rant is about it's about mattresses. So there's a local post put up that 2 mattresses had been dumped outside a charity shop. Why they were dumped around, they were pretty disgusting looking as well, the mattresses. Why they were dumped around a charity shop. But the number of comments in the Facebook about effectively just making excuses for the person that dumped the mattresses. And I'm like, that person's obviously gone and bought new mattresses for house. So they put the effort in and bought the new mattresses. Why don't they put an equal amount of effort into making sure they dispose of their old mattresses properly? That was my very simple rant for the week.
That's fair enough. It's like with everything, isn't it? Just dispose of it properly, and I'll still be happy.
Take a bit of responsibility, and I'll be happy. I've actually managed to wean myself off commenting on these things. I just move on to the next thing. Life's too short to get excited about these things.
To get into mattress wars.
Yep. So there we go. So that was our episode. What did I say? 94. Our waste journey into
our 4th
textiles. Yeah. So if you get any bright ideas for our 100th episode, please get in touch.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode. See you again next Thursday at 4 p.m. Don't forget to follow, share with friends, and send us your feedback at hello@rubbishtalk.co.uk.